Well, Lily, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Arlena. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, me too. We were just chatting before I hit record, and I was like, "Holy crap, we're gonna have so much to talk about." We're gonna be talking about this need to do it on your own early in recovery, why people feel that way, what's underneath it, how to address that. We're going to talk about a little bit about responsible coaching. You and I have seen some things out in social media where people are offering support who don't have any credentials. We'll get into it. But I'm super excited to hear about your plans for next year. The how free do you want to be? I love that theme. That is so amazing. And specifically, freedom from the scale. That's going to be so good. And of course, dating and sobriety, because it's all related. It's all one.
It is all connected. And of course, I couldn't get to looking at freedom from the scale or dating and sobriety until I really was free from the booze. That is truly the first step in all of this.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that's crisis management, right? I saw something on social media this morning about hard truths. Alcohol makes you look like shit. So there's just that. let's just let's
Yes.
just throw that out there. Makes
But
you look
I
horrible.
always thought it made me prettier.
Just because you feel pretty, don't mean you is.
True. And I've got some photos to prove that.
Oh my God. I was looking at photo. Somebody asked me, "Oh, people need to see your before and after." And I was like, my before, I was 25 when I got sober. And I did find one drunk picture. And of course, it was on a piece of paper. It was like a printed picture. Like, who has those anymore?
I do.
I do. When I had my hair, I had like the big poofy thing on top. I was in 94 when I got sober. So I had like that big poofy thing on top and the perm in the back. It's ridiculous. I should post it somewhere. It'll be funny.
Post it.
Post it. All sloppy drunk. Oh my God. Anyway, this is not about me. This will be about you today. So self-centered.
I would love to hear about your transformation, but I have because
We
I've
have.
listened to your podcast.
Oh,
I've,
you're
I've heard
adorable.
about some of your backstory.
You're my new best friend. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I love anybody who will listen to me. But we're going to start with the lightning round. Are you ready? You ready to play?
Ready?
Don't be scared. I know this is going to kick off your perfectionism, but don't be afraid.
Don't say that word, Arlena.
I know. I take it back.
That's the P word.
I know that's the one
Perfect.
we don't like that one. Progress. That's a better one.
Progress.
How about this? What was a book that helped you early in recovery?
Early in recovery, well, leading up to recovery, I was one of those drunks who would read the bios of people who had successfully gotten sober. And one in particular I recall reading is called Blackout by Sarah Hepola.
Yes.
Dallas, where I live. And it was a great book. And I was so enraptured by it that I would sit in the evening at my dining room table and drink it and read it as I was drinking yet another glass of wine. And then the next night, if I went back to it, I'd be rereading the same
Oh my gosh.
page. So I'm not sure exactly what I was reading right before I got to my rock bottom. But early in sobriety, reading just short snippets of people's journeys to recovery, in particular, The Grapevine is a little printed magazine that they had at a 12-step group that I started going to. And so having that handy and being able to read a 1 or 2 page story by someone in recovery was very helpful for me, because when I hit bottom, I knew I was drinking too much. I knew it was a problem, but I didn't realize that I really did have an alcohol abuse disorder, or that I was an alcoholic, whichever way you want to phrase it. I will happily refer to myself as an alcoholic. And reading the literature in the 12-step programs was very beneficial to me to make that identification and to start to realize that that wasn't the worst thing in the world.
Exactly. Man, I feel like I use that term as a badge of honor. Like I am an alcoholic. And for me, it's, I think what people don't understand is words are just symbols and we assign meaning to those words. And at first I was ashamed of that word alcoholic or embarrassed by it or whatever. But over time, I began to recognize that this group of people were actually a courageous group who had a near death experience, who survived and were helping others. And so to me, like the word alcoholic became like this, it's like, oh, you and I are the same. Like you get my kind of crazy. And I know that you are someone who is brave and has courage. So I'm so glad you brought that up.
And I agree 100% with you. If someone says, I am an alcoholic, I immediately know a lot about you. And it's amazing to me. I went to meet with some medical students at UT Southwestern here in Dallas a few weeks ago. And we were telling our stories and just talking about what recovery options are available, because a lot of these medical students have never encountered alcoholism at its worst. And they're about to, of course, depending on the kind of medicine they're intending to practice. But one of the questions from one of the doctors to be was related to how proudly we referred to ourselves as alcoholics and that it wasn't offensive to us. And it doesn't carry that negative connotation, to me at least, when I say it, because I'm in recovery.
Right. I think it's an offensive word. And I know this is going to piss people off, but I think it's a word that indicate like if you're ashamed about it, so you haven't done your work yet. Like you don't really understand what it really is. Like it's important to educate yourself about what alcoholism is, what it means. And so it's just a sign that education needs to happen. Don't be afraid. It's all good.
Don't be afraid. One of the things I learned early on that made me feel a little calmer and at peace with the fact that I did have a drinking problem and that things had to change, and wearing the term alcoholic was understanding that this really is a sickness.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I'm not a bad person trying to get good. I'm a sick person working on getting well. And alcoholism, in my opinion, is the only fatal disease that has to be, one, self-diagnosed, and second, self-treated for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody else can keep me away from the bottle if I want to go there.
Yeah.
I have to be doing that work.
Yeah. It's along the lines of it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility type of thing.
Well
I'm so
said.
glad you're talking to medical students, man. It's always shocking to me how little the medical community understands alcoholism and addiction in all its forms. They get very little training. And I've heard some crazy stories from people where they have been told some really inappropriate things by doctors just because they don't get it. It's crazy.
I think that is definitely a lack of education. But one of the things I shared with those students was that I was not honest with my doctors. If I said, oh, yeah, I have one or two, that didn't mean one or two drinks. It might have meant one or two bottles of wine or something else, because I was hiding how much I was drinking to the best of my ability. I wasn't going to tell my doctors.
Yeah,
I didn't have a problem, but I didn't want you to tell me I should cut back. And so they really never had the opportunity to help me until I hit bottom and I came clean and said, I need help.
Yeah. Oh, man, that's people think it's the end. It's just the beginning.
It's the beginning. It's a gift.
The beginning. Such a gift. Do you have a go-to mantra or quote that you live by?
Nothing changes if nothing changes.
So good, man. When I first got sober, there was that Einstein quote, a problem can't be solved at the same level of thinking that created it. It's like, if your mind created this problem, your mind isn't going to be able to solve it. I love that.
I agree with that. the caveat that I would throw in there, though, is that our minds can change, but I have to be willing to create the changes in my brain and in the stories and those inherent intrinsic beliefs that I have.
Yeah.
So I do believe the brain can somewhat be reprogrammed,
100%.
but it takes work. It doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen just because I stopped drinking.
Oh my gosh. Yes, yes, yes to all those things. Yeah. Neuroplasticity is a thing. You can actually rewire your brain.
Absolutely.
You're right. It does take work. And it doesn't have to be painful. Do you have a regular self-care routine? And that could either be like a morning practice or a weekly one. I even had somebody mention that they go to like an annual retreat. So I'm just curious what that looks like for you.
My most important self-care practice, as far as requiring physical action and exertion of some sort, is going to yoga and having my own personal yoga practice. I was reintroduced to yoga back in 2011 when I was working as an attorney at a big law firm, and I was really unhappy. I was drinking a lot. I wasn't taking care of my body. And when I got into yoga, it really reconnected me. And that was one of my first experiences feeling some sort of spiritual connection, even though I didn't recognize it as such at the time. And so that physical practice is really the best way for me to get out of my normal bubble and move my body and resync and be on my mat. And of course, physically, it feels amazing. So that's a big part of my self-care routine. But I pray or meditate, however you want to view it, every day, just to get centered and to ask the universe, God, the divine, whatever you want to call it. For me, when I say God today, God means the great one, divine. It doesn't mean some religious man with a long beard up in the sky.
Daddy for you?
Sky Daddy. No Sky Daddy. Although that's cool if that's your bag or listeners listening to this. You know, I have no judgment, but mine is really this universal energy. And what I believe is this benevolence of wanting the best for people, wanting us to be happy, joyous, and free. And so connecting with that greater power, the universe, and asking for direction in the morning, but also throughout the day.
That's really good. Tell me your acronym for God again. Great One Divine. Great One Divine. Sorry, you might be hearing my dog complaining outside the door. Do you hear that?
No.
No? Okay, good. We'll just pretend like that didn't happen. Okay. Yeah. So, you know, it's so interesting. You know, I use hypnosis in my practice, and we talk about the conscious mind, like you and I are talking. We talk about the subconscious mind, which is all like your hidden beliefs and ideas about who you are in the world. And then there's the unconscious mind, which is your body, right? And I recognize at some point that doing the somatic work, doing the body work was a huge part of my healing. Like they say the issues are in the tissues. You know, I
have not heard that, and I love that.
Isn't that good?
Yes, yeah, it's true.
As a yoga practitioner, have you found, like, I heard that trauma is often stored in the hips, and is that a thing?
Well, I haven't read the book, and it's on my list, but the phrase, the body keeps the score, is absolutely true. Our bodies do, in my own personal experience and working with others, our bodies do hold our experiences. And the hips will hang on to all kinds of feelings, emotions, typically not positive. And so I know I have personally had the experience of being in pigeon in a class one day and just immediately starting to cry. And that was early in my
Yeah.
practice, but I soon was learned that that was an emotional release of some sort that
Yeah.
my body needed to let go of. And
Isn't
so
that amazing?
I've experienced students starting to cry in class because
Hmm.
things were coming up that they hadn't recognized. And so,
Yeah.
yes, I believe our physical bodies hold on to all kinds of stress and tension and experiences for us
Not
and are
to us.
trying to do us a service in that way. You know, if my shoulders are way up by my ears, they're trying to keep the tension so that my brain can keep operating. But if
Is
I
that
can
what's
bring them
happening?
down and let go of that stress or whatever that is going on in there, it's probably better for me in the long run.
Yeah, for sure. That's amazing. Yeah, and yoga sort of encompasses the whole body, mind, spirit, like as a unit. I love that.
It
Uh,
does and it can, although in the US, I feel it seems to be our focus is mostly on the physical workout and burning calories rather than that
there's
reconnection.
Yeah, yeah, it's a whole different man. Intention matters, right? Like I do feel like fitness and exercise is so good for a multitude of reasons, not the least of which is resetting all your neurotransmitters. But I like the idea of, I do practice yoga. Actually, do you know who Tommy Rosen is from Recovery 2.0? Oh my gosh, you would love him. He's got this whole community and they're doing a oh gosh, I'm going to screw up the word. They're doing a yoga practice, a morning yoga practice for the month of January. It's free. They're expecting 10,000 people to show up for this thing. Should be fun.
Incredible.
Isn't that amazing? But yeah, it's just the gentle combination of addressing body, mind, spirit in one practice first thing in the morning. I love,
Yes.
I love that idea. Um, let's see. I'm going to move on because this lightning round, I'm always so slow about it.
We've gone down a few tangents or
That's the kind of the whole point, though, to front load the episode with some resources. But I've been asking my guests to share a spiritual experience story lately because I think many people have different ideas about what a spiritual experience is. And it's so helpful to hear other people's stories because I feel like it will trigger memories and for people that hear what a spiritual experience is, and they can then recognize, oh, maybe I have had spiritual experiences in my past. Does anything leap to mind for you?
I've never had one big burning bush moment that I could identify as that one time when I truly believed in spiritual experiences. My experience spiritually has been a collection of little events that looking back could not be coincidences, where I look back and I firmly believe that there was something else guiding me, guiding the other person or other people. One big example was the first 12-step meeting I ever went to. I had not had a drink in a couple of weeks at that point, and I was not going to go to 12-step meetings. Thank you very much. I didn't want to be preached at. I didn't want to hear about God, Jesus, whatever you got. That was not going to be happening for me. And so maybe one of the, other recovery programs at some point, but it was a Monday afternoon. I was at home. I didn't have the urge to drink, but something in my brain said, you need to find a way to stay away from alcohol. And I'm a very independent person who thinks she can do, or I think I should be able to do things on my own. But that thought that I do not take any credit for got me online looking at resources. And wouldn't you know, there was a 12-step meeting near me at 6 p.m. And I went to my first meeting and there were my people. And I had not had the thought of going to a 12-step meeting, Arlena. I was staunchly anti 12 step. But there I went. There I was. That was not Lily's brain that took her to that meeting that night. I think that that was direction. And since then, I've had all kinds of experiences where certain people, clients, women that I've worked with in recovery have been put into my life at certain times where there was some sort of divine planning involved. It was not merely a coincidence.
Yeah, I have a friend who called coincidences. She calls them coincigods.
Coincidence.
So cute. You know, it is that feeling of how did this possibly happen? Right. And then it's like, maybe there is something out there that cares about me. Maybe there's something that's personal to me. Carolyn Mace offered up her definition, which was that God was law, but it was also personal. And that's something that I've really held on to because my sciencey mind likes to acknowledge the universal physical laws, right? But there is that little part of me that is hoping that there is something that cares about me personally. And when you've had a spiritual experience that leaves you with that feeling like, how did this happen? Like something, it makes you feel like it made me feel connected.
Yes.
Yeah.
Although it can be difficult to recognize it at the time. Some of my greatest blessings that I don't attribute to myself at all, again, it's the great one divine, have involved loss of things that I thought I really wanted or needed. Like when I was fired from a job at 14 months sober, the universe had been telling me for a long time to move along down the road. This is not the right thing for you. And I was clinging on to it with I think of those signs with the cat with its claws out and it says, hang in there, kitty. That was me clinging to this job out of fear because I didn't trust that God, the universe, had me and was taking me to something better. It was like when I didn't want to give up alcohol because I thought, well, how am I going to go out to dinner? How am I going to go to concerts? How am I going to date? How am I going to kiss a guy? How am I going to do all of these things? How am I going to just live? Because I was a daily drinker. I would drink for no occasion, for any occasion, didn't matter. So how am I going to give that up? I looked at it as a loss rather than a gift that I now see it is. Same thing with that job loss. And I've got other experiences with this. What am I going to do? Well, the universe had a plan but it had to force me to move down the road and get in line with the plan. And so today I'm a lot more open-minded and a little less resistant and a little less have to hang on and cling to what I think is the right thing for me. But it's taken some experience and practice and talking to other people who have had similar experiences.
Yeah, that reminded me when you were talking about the claws, it reminded me of that saying that everything I let go of had claw marks on it.
Yes.
But man, that's God doing for you what you couldn't do for yourself. I had a very similar experience. Just before COVID hit, I was getting certified for coaching, and I had my work. I was like, God did not put me on this planet to sell software. Like I desperately wanted to get rid of it. It was good money, so it was hard to let go of.
Yes.
But as an attorney, I can't even imagine. But my work laptop password was new job 2020. I was like, I'm going to evoke some law of attraction stuff here. And COVID hits, and I was selling VPN at the time, which means that was for those that don't know, VPN is the mechanism that allowed people to work from home. So literally I was selling to the enterprise at enterprise level. So every customer I had to make a purchase. I was working 14 hours a day, spitting out quotes, and I made more money than I've ever made in my entire sales career. And by the end of the year, our company had done so well, it got acquired by another larger company, and they laid off the entire inside sales team, which I was a part of. So I made more money than I ever made. I got a huge severance package, and I got fired too, but I was released to do the job I felt like I was meant to do. And it's so interesting. I think there's a lot of people that when they get sober, they're like suddenly aware of a greater purpose, like their life has greater purpose. And the
Absolutely.
old things that we needed, like alcohol is used as a coping mechanism to help us do things we don't want to do, like jobs that no longer fit. That must have been so hard, giving up that paycheck. And did you find that you had a little bit of attachment to the title and the identity of attorney?
I did. My ego had a little bit of a challenge with that. um, we talked
Same.
about the P word a little earlier.
Perfectionism.
Huh?
Not penis, not penis.
No, perfect. Perfect. I can think of a few P words that people might be, I don't know, offended by, but perfect. Giving up the attorney role and title for the most part. Now, I still do occasionally work on writing projects because that's what I enjoy doing.
Legal writing?
Legal writing projects. I'll occasionally do that when I have the time and the inclination.
Yeah. But you don't do it because you have to.
Exactly.
Which is very different.
It's because I like to still reactivate that piece of my brain. And it helps me keep engaged with what's going on in that community, because that's a community I really love to serve as a coach and in my wellness practice today. However, I had gone down the list, Arlena, when I was younger. I was a good girl. I wanted you to like me. I wanted to please you. So I was a people pleaser. There's another P,
Same.
Double P.
Same thing.
And a perfectionist. I had to get good grades, and I did. I went through college, got into top tier law school, got a great job. I had UT Law down in Austin. Nice. I had been so good at checking off these boxes, but I hadn't stopped to think about what really was best for me and what felt right for my insides.
Yeah, that is
I was
so
checking
common.
off, somebody else's boxes, hoping to please them and thinking that this is the way to build a successful, secure life, because financial security was very, very important to me. Mm-hmm. And so earning that title and getting those kudos of, oh, you work at that firm, or, oh, you're an attorney. People were so impressed.
I love impressing people.
And I really didn't, I didn't understand why, but it felt good. It felt good to be praised for that.
I feel like we should start an achievement junkie fan support group.
Type A achievement recovery. Yes.
Yeah,
there would be so many of us in that group, Arlena.
Yeah, we should do it.
So many. I know so many people in recovery who are just like me, just like you, perfectionists, high achievers, people pleasers.
Oh, and that's, you were also talking before about burnout. Like, that's a pretty severe symptom of perfectionism.
Yes, because I don't know what perfect is. Do you? It's an illusion.
Do you know how I know I've achieved perfection? Is when someone goes, like you were saying earlier, like when someone goes, ooh, I was like, there it is. That's what I was looking for. That's the dopamine hit I was looking for.
Oh, that's what you were looking for, huh?
Yeah, it wasn't my definition of perfect. It was, what can I do to make you go, ooh, impressive?
One of the ways I have recognized growth and progress in myself through this process has been being able to say a lot more often than I used to, I don't know.
Ooh. Oh,
I don't know.
Freeing.
Let me
Yeah.
ask this person, or you might want to talk to that person, or
Mhm.
let's look it up.
I don't know.
I don't know. I always thought I needed to know. And
Yeah.
I jokingly refer to myself as a recovering attorney, but that's part of that mindset is as a lawyer, I felt like I always needed to have the exact right answer and to be perfect and to have all the semicolons where they needed to be, the colons where they were supposed to be, the em dash instead of the comma, instead of the grammar junkie, all of those things had to be just right. And I put a lot of pressure on myself related to that. Unnecessary pressure for the most part,
Yeah, I
but
hear you.
there was still that mindset. And so that I have to know, I have to have an answer, and I can't say something that's going to make you think less of me
Right.
if I haven't done it just right.
Yeah. Oh, that's a terrible place to be in, where you feel like I always felt like I had to do twice as much just to feel half as good. It's exhausting.
Mhm.
Let's talk a little bit about, kind of how we got here. And I just want to touch on childhood stuff for just a moment because I'm endlessly fascinated. I feel like the setting in childhood sort of, predicts what's going to happen in the future. What was your family of origin like?
I am the only child of older parents, and there is alcoholism in my family history. But neither of my parents were or are alcoholics. Um, as an only child, I was alone a lot. And so I learned to entertain myself. As an only child, I also, for better or for worse, got the full attention of both of my parents. And they are both educated people who expected me to get good grades and to do well. And the P word was present, perfect, was present in my home growing up. And I recall very specifically that there was one semester, maybe in middle school or junior high, where I brought home a B. It wasn't even the final grade, but I had a B on my report card. And there was much cause for concern related to that B. But I graduated at the top of my class. I went on to do really well in school after high school, as we've already discussed a little bit. But for better or for worse, right or wrong, I developed some intrinsic beliefs in that early stage, one of which was I needed to be good. And that meant being quiet, getting the good grades, making sure you were happy with me, making sure I didn't inconvenience you or put you out, not asking for too much, not saying what I really, really wanted. So just keeping to myself. And I also felt different and uncomfortable in my own skin a lot of the time because, well, one, I looked different. I was a pale skinned redhead with the crooked teeth and a somewhat different first name, Lily, compared to most of my other peers. And I just didn't want to be who I was. I wanted to be a brunette who could go out by the pool and get tan and be a cheerleader and popular and comfortable in her own skin, the way I thought that all these other young women were. And I don't know how they really felt on the inside, but I was comparing my insides to their outsides and what I perceived I wanted to be, which was not what I was.
Well, it's so interesting how that is such a common thread for all of us, is like feeling different, feeling othered, and not wanting, I so relate to not wanting to be who I was, right? Not valuing who I was. And that's really tough. When did alcohol enter the picture?
Alcohol came in my 12 to 13 year age range, probably. I can't tell you the exact time I took my first drink, and I'm always fascinated by people who can. But my earliest recollection was being at one of my best friend's homes, and her father had one of those little bar areas next to the kitchen with those fancy crystal decanters with very strange, kind of yucky looking brown liquid inside of them. But I knew enough to know that the alcohol would make me feel different and change how I felt. And so I don't know what I mixed it with, but it didn't taste very good. It burned, it was gross. I didn't get drunk that first time, but I knew that I could, and that this was an answer to making me feel better, feel freer, have a good time. And I can't tell you exactly how I developed that concept, but I knew that alcohol would change how I felt. And so I finally found the answer in Bartles and James wine coolers.
Oh my God, Marls and James.
Mainly red fruit punch or whatever they were.
Yeah.
Wine coolers that we got people with fake IDs or adults to buy for us. I had some friends whose parents made moonshine and would have us over, and we would we would drink what had been brewed at home.
How old were you at that time?
I was a teenager around then.
Yeah.
These
Oh,
are all
that's so
teenage
funny.
years.
All teenage years. That's when the trouble starts.
Absolutely. But I learned that alcohol gave me those urs. I wanted to feel, and I did feel funnier, prettier, sassier. I was more likely to get out on the dance floor, and it made me feel better and more comfortable. And so the repercussions, going home and throwing up bright red Bartles and James wine coolers at the end of the night, that was a small price to pay for all the fun that I'd had at the skating rink with the band dancing to the cover songs.
Oh my God, the skating rink. I remember those days. When did you recognize that alcohol was a problem and that you needed to do something about it? Was it a series? Was it a period of time? When did you recognize it was a problem that you wanted to solve?
I didn't face the truth until that very last night, September 3rd, 2018. There had been so many moments, Arlena, leading up to that night that could have been the end for me. And there had been a multitude of red flags. Making a fool of myself in front of friends, did that a lot. Getting kicked out of bars, more than once. And all kinds of other consequences that did show me that this was becoming a little less fun, but I wasn't miserable enough until the very, very end. And that final day, I recognized that I had no control over my drinking. And most importantly, I was going to die if I kept drinking the way I was drinking.
But I
die, thank God. And
what's that?
And I didn't want to die, thank God. And so I reached out to one of my best friends, and she helped me make a plan, and I actually followed through on the plan.
Why do you think you followed through on the plan?
I had reached that point of true desperation. I knew somewhere down in my soul, I knew that I could not do this alone. And initially, I didn't recognize that it was the first drink that got me. And I had never wanted to control my drinking. So why would I ever want to start? But I didn't recognize that it really was that first drink that kicked it off for me. And I would, if I wanted to live a happy, sober, free life, have to stay away from alcohol for the rest of my life, one day at a time.
Day at a time. Where have I heard that before?
I'm not
Okay.
sure. I tend to hear it around the recovery community
Yes.
occasionally. But the idea that I had initially was, oh, well, I'll just stop for a while and then I'll be okay. I could
So
regain some
tempting.
control or
Yeah.
moderate. And once I started looking deeper at the problem and at my drinking history, very prodigious drinking career that I had, I was 37 when I hit rock bottom.
Yeah.
I put some solid work into that. It wasn't until I started learning more about the disease of alcoholism and what recovery looked like and what a blessing it is,
Yeah.
that I recognized, no, I'm not going to be able to moderate or control it. I need to just surrender it and move
Yeah.
on into my life.
I feel like that's such an important question to answer, though. Can I moderate it? Like, that's a really important question for people to answer, because until that answer is absolutely no, then there's always this hope, or there's always this hope that maybe I'll be able to manage it or control it. So I think that's a really important question to answer.
I agree. I don't think that a lot of experimentation related to that question is required. But I believe if an individual still has doubts about whether she can control it or moderate it, then she needs to find out.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's really important. Um, and I appreciate what you said about being at like a deadly disease. Like, I can't tell you how many times I actually went to high school with a gal who was sober for about 13 years. And I don't know what happened to make her go back to drinking, but the end result was that she died of alcohol poisoning. And I can tell you, I've been sober a long time. And I remember when I first got sober, they say if you stay sober long enough, you'll go to a lot of funerals. And that has been, the case for me. Is I've seen people die of alcoholism in a variety of ways, whether it was car accidents or they kill other people in car accidents. That's happened many times. But yeah, it's deadly, not only for us, but those at large and around us, that it can be at the effect of our drinking and driving and things like that. That can be really dangerous.
Truth. And I've known people who were still technically sober, hadn't taken a drink, but decided to kill themselves in another way. And that breaks my heart.
That's really sad. But you also said something about having that experience of true desperation, and I feel like that is such a gift. Being like so desperate, like I will do anything that I have to do to get sober, and maybe that feeds into the perfectionism, right? It's like, I've done everything that I know to do. It's not, what I'm doing is not working. So I have to try something different, which kind of leads back to that idea that you were talking about, that if nothing changes, nothing changes. So it's about changing the important things that make all the difference. So let me ask you, you talked about how you started going to 12-step meetings. Did you get a sponsor and do all the steps and just do the whole thing?
I got a sponsor a week or two in, and she was an angel put into my life. Um, Great sobriety, great understanding of the disease, and she was a really strong mentor for me. And she took me right through the steps, got me to work. And one of the things I did pretty early on and have continued to do is to stay involved in my group.
Yeah.
And to be of service, to take meetings to hospitals, to rehabs, and really embrace the connection and the community and the fellowship. Because as an only child growing up by myself, I always wanted connection.
Yeah.
Arlena, I made up imaginary friends. I had all these stories that I would create in my head where, there were these communities of people and these characters that I really wanted to be. And I was living out those ideas in my mind and playing pretend by myself a lot.
Mm,
And I wanted that connection with
yeah.
other people. I wanted that fellowship. And so that was one of the most attractive parts of the 12-step community when I went into that first meeting and someone asked me about how long I'd been drinking. And I thought, oh, I can talk about this here. And this is something that people do talk about here. And so finding that community and that connection early on really was such a relief because it was something I'd been searching for.
Yeah, I feel like a couple of things that happen to people when they quit drinking is they get lonely and then they don't have enough to do. Like boredom and loneliness are a really common experience for people early in recovery. And a community is so helpful because I don't know what it was like in your area, but there was always like a sober party. There's always somebody celebrating a milestone. Listen, we love to go out to eat, so there was always somebody to go out to eat with or some sort of celebration. Or I discovered like there was like volleyball leagues or like softball league, sober softball leagues. Like there's so much to do once you get into it. Did you find that you had to change your friend group?
My friend group did not change tremendously, but my people, places, and things did change. I used to leave the office and go home if I didn't have dinner plans or something like that. And of course, dinner plans would involve drinks.
Drinking.
But at some point, I would go home and I would start drinking by myself on the sofa with my two rescue dogs. And while that's all charming and fun and snuggly, that was a very isolated, lonely existence. And so
Yeah.
instead of going home immediately after work, I started going to my group for the 6 o'clock meeting and go to dinner with people after that. My core friend group didn't really change because I'm the drunk of
Yeah.
my really close friends. I'm fortunate to have very close friends who have known me since before my drinking really went off the rails and have been super supportive of my recovery. But for example, with one of them, she and I would go out to dinners and drink wine and cocktails. And that was part of how we socialized and interacted together. And so she and I decided, well, we'll go to a yoga class together or we'll do something different before I was really comfortable going out to eat, because those things that I used to do that always involved alcohol, I had to step back from, at least for a little while. And I know today that I can go anywhere, be around anyone, even, where alcohol is served or being consumed, and that's not a problem. But early on, I needed to really protect my sobriety and take it just one teeny tiny baby step at a time as far as being around people who were drinking to the best I could.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I love I just wrote down changed activities so that you still were able to maintain and nurture those relationships that were supportive and healthy, but you just did something different for a little while. That's
Yes.
awesome. Yeah, that's
And
really good.
I had some friends that I used to go out with, and we would frequently just go for drinks. And those friendships, some of them transitioned a little bit, but those weren't the really deep ones that I cared about maintaining. And I did make very close friends in recovery.
Yeah, I had a whole new set of friends.
Mhm.
Love that. I want to talk to you a little bit about, you know, we talked a little bit about how you're dating in sobriety. That is a that is a big one. I mean, do you so h- tell me how you do it. Or how are you like where do you meet potential dates? Like how do you broach the subject of being sober? What does that look like for you?
Arlena, full disclosure, I haven't dated a ton in sobriety. And let me back up and set the stage on why.
You mean you're
No,
not dating a bunch of dudes in AA? That's weird.
I do not recommend that, although I know people who have done it.
I have. Yeah, I met my husband. I was 5 months sober. And
There you go. I know people like you.
yeah, I'm a unicorn. 28. We've been together for 28 years.
That really is a unicorn.
Yeah, I know that's not common, but Yeah, they say that the odds are good, but the goods are odd.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
And that's part of its charm, right? Let me back up a little bit. So
Okay.
before I hit bottom and got sober, I used men the way I used a
Mm.
lot of things.
So my eyebrows go up. Yes, I understand. My
You're not
second drug
watching the
addiction.
video. You're missing out on all the facial expressions going on in this conversation.
Yeah, now we really are talking about a different P.
Yes, yes, we are.
We're
And
talking about, yes.
partnership could be one
Oh,
possibility.
oh, okay. Sorry. My mind went straight to the gutter.
But I looked at men or shoes or shiny things as
Shoes.
ways that would as things that would make me feel better. And
Yes.
to be fair, I had some really awesome boyfriends when I was still drinking. Some of them were probably pure saints for me when I was drinking way too much. But I knew some really good guys, and I dated some really good normal guys when I was in the thick of it. But towards the end, Arlena, I was like a bull. There would be red flag after red flag with a potential person.
Uh-huh.
And I'd see them and I'd say, that's a red flag. That's a red flag. I'm going to just charge at it because maybe you're not Mr. Right, but you can be Mr. Right
Mr.
now.
Right now.
And you're a distraction for me. And
Yeah.
bless their hearts, the man I was kind of dating at the very end, I was really mean to him.
He probably
And
deserved it.
I recognized, no, he was
No,
a
I'm sorry.
pretty
That's
good
a terrible thing
guy.
to say.
I mean, we were a match made in heaven because he drank like me. And that was also a really bad thing.
Yeah.
But I recognized when I got into early sobriety and when I started getting involved in working the steps and recovery that I needed to take a break from dating because I was going to use dating, if I picked it right back up, as a substitute for alcohol, as a distraction. Because what better way to keep yourself busy and occupied than swiping left or right on whichever app is your favorite? That was something I did when I was drinking all the time, and that could easily become a substitute and take all of my focus, because it takes a lot of time and energy to be on the dating apps.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of time and energy, or it can take a lot of time and energy when you're actively searching for a partner or dating around. And so I had spent so much time and energy on those distractions that I put them to the side. My sponsor and recovery in general recommends that we not date or get into romantic or sexual relationships in the first year. And I had heard that, and I knew that I needed to do that. And so I did. And looking back, I am very glad that I took a break from dating, because also 1 year is not necessarily the magic number. I didn't hit day 366 in sobriety and go, okay, boys, here I am, right? I'm a healed, perfect partner for you. Come and get it. That was not my experience. But for a daily drinker like me, especially, not picking up a drink for a year was a big change for my brain. We talk about, changing the neural pathways.
Yeah.
My brain needed time and space to recognize and recalibrate that we are not drinking. This is a good way of living. And we don't have to just default to grabbing a guy to make us feel better about ourselves. Because that's what I did. I would date that person who wasn't right for me. And that wasn't fair to him. It wasn't fair to me. And I was doing it for validation because I thought, oh, you think I'm pretty. You like me. And so that's what I was really seeking with some of those men.
I think what the underpinnings are of the whole not dating for a year is that it's better to, water seeks its own level, right? Our dysfunction will attract at that level. And so when we heal that part of us, what we're really healing, well, among other things, but is our identity and our self-esteem, right? We heal the self-esteem, we create this new, relate to a new sober identity, like who am I as a sober person? What is my worth? What do I deserve in life? Then, if then you can attract from that level, right? And I've seen it so often where people early in recovery are still seeking distraction, like you were saying, or seeking external validation. But when we heal our self-esteem, what we're really doing is we're giving self-validation. Like, they say, oh, you need to learn to love yourself. What they're really talking about is getting reconnected with self, like your own feelings. Like when we're in the addiction, we're so numb to to our own feelings. It takes a little bit of time to be like, to really notice what you want, how you feel in certain situations. And you were talking about, what you're talking about was being honest with yourself, honest with others about what you really want or what you really like or whatever. And so I think that's why they say, to wait a year, give yourself a little time to heal so that you can attract from a healthier place, instead of looking for somebody who's going to give you that little hit of dopamine and distraction.
Yes, but I also see people who do have that 1 year of sobriety and hopefully have healed some, at least, still going out and seeking that dopamine hit from whatever it is, food or dating or shopping or gambling.
Yeah.
Switching over and substituting. And I love what you said as far as recalibrating and learning to check our insides and how things are internally with me. I've worked with some women who have a pretty strong sobriety program, and working as a coach with women in that situation who have done a lot of healing work, but started so low on the self-esteem scale that working the steps, working some sort of recovery program has improved that, but they've needed something more than the 12 steps.
Yeah.
And
Something more.
continuing to grow and expand and improve how we relate to ourselves and how we show up. Because I think that the emphasis at times, depending on the groups you go to and how people speak about it, the focus can become so much on we are selfish and self-centered, or we need to be humbled, and we need to learn that I am the cause whenever I'm disturbed about something. I need to look at myself. That can be really enlightening, but also I don't want to say damaging, but
It can be. It can be.
it can be not helpful, damaging.
Yeah, well, I feel especially strong about that because it is so important in the beginning to like have that mentality to break through denial. But it can be damaging because left unchecked, it can, like sobriety needs to include acknowledging assets, like what's working, and what I'm
Yes.
saying? And
Positive character traits, not just the liabilities.
yeah, not just the liabilities. It's so easy to focus on the problem and forget that there's so much. But this constant beating of the drum of I'm not good enough, that's not helpful either. That it needs to be tempered. It needs to be balanced. And we are a group of people that live in
What
the
is balance?
What is that? Yeah, like we need to balance this idea of being selfish and self-centered and self-seeking with compassion. Like compassion has to be in play here. otherwise it's like, I just can't walk around feeling like I'm guilty and wrong all the time. Like
That's right.
that's no way to live.
And when things don't feel right to me, yes, I look at my part,
Right.
but I can also look at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And that's something that I don't think we teach enough in the
Yeah.
rooms, is to look at the big picture and what you are doing right. And also to say, well, this was how I grew up, as a perfectionist and a people pleaser and seeking validation. And so it makes sense that I might have been attracted to this person or this thing, and it didn't work out. So now can I change my mindset related to how I'm approaching dating and how I view myself
Yeah.
and what I'm
Huge.
wanting to get out of it?
Yeah, that's huge. Connecting with self first. How can you tell anybody else what it is that you want and you like if you don't know your damn self? Right? It's like, hey, we need a minute of compassion and kindness to be able to like reconnect with self, to really accept what it is that we want and what
Mm-hmm.
brings joy. That really
Well,
takes a
and
minute.
what do we want? I have encountered a lot of people this past year, especially, that they may be clear on what they say they don't want, but that doesn't mean that they know what they really do want, with what's going to make them feel good,
Yeah.
loved, and whatever that internal sensation is that they want to create or achieve. And that shows up in so many ways, in work and love and um, in working out, how we're
Body
treating
image.
ourselves, body image. Oof,
Girl, should we talk about that?
near and dear to my heart. Yes, but it's really getting clear on that want. And it's normal to want things. It's normal to have these desires.
Yeah.
I think that's normal and natural. And I think God
Good.
gave me the desire to be doing what I'm doing now,
Yeah.
gave you the desire to be doing what you're doing now.
Yeah.
But it's getting okay with that, even if it doesn't fit on that checklist that everybody else, that society had planned out
Yeah.
for
Somebody
us.
else's checklist.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a little bit. We're at the end of the year. As we're sitting here recording this in December. And in 2023, you've mentioned your theme of how free do you want to be? And I love that. There's always room for growth, right? We're either evolving or devolving. So I kind of like to focus on the evolving part. And you mentioned freedom from the scale, which I think is so important, because it's like, once the crisis of drugs and alcohol is resolved, and you talked about switching addictions, we need to be mindful that we're not switching addictions. If you're in your 30s and 40s and later, like me, the scale is not always your friend. And so you talked about, freedom from the scale. And there's a lot of women and men too that listen to this that struggle with weight. Tell me a little bit about what your oh my gosh, if I could only speak. Tell me what next year is going to look like for you.
Well, next year, as you said, is going to be all about creating freedom. And one of the lines in the big book is, we're sure our creator wants us to be happy, joyous, and free. And well, if you're free from alcohol, or if you're working on that freedom, that's just, in my opinion, the baseline. That's your crisis management, as you said earlier. And so for me, it's not enough to just stop with putting down the bottle. It's, how can I become free in my mind, in my body, in my spirit, in my life, and how I'm showing up. And for me personally, getting free from the scale has been one of the biggest challenges I have faced. My love affair with food and my disordered eating habits predated in some ways, or were stronger in some ways, than my drinking from an early age. I was taught that thin is beautiful. And when I was thinner, I was gorgeous. And when I wasn't as thin, I was pretty. I had a pretty face. And so that
You had a good
mindset,
personality.
That mindset, yes, great personality, pretty face. And so that mindset has stuck with me. And I know I don't speak for just myself, but that's what I'm going to do. And so when I came into uh, sobriety, when I started to put the drink down, I started to recognize that, well, I have these other things that are hampering me. Because one way I like to frame it for people, for clients, or people who aren't sure whether they need to do this work is, well, okay, how much time do you spend thinking about your weight? How much money have you spent on special diets, workouts? How much energy each day are you putting into your body image, into checking yourself in the mirror, into worrying about how many calories was in that donut that you ate at the office? And those numbers and that time and that energy that I know I personally have expended related to that number on the scale are really high and very similar to the amount of time, energy, and money I spent with my drinking. And so my obsession or my fixation, if I have it on food or controlling my weight, is just another way that I'm keeping myself small and that I'm keeping myself in bondage and I'm not being my fullest self. Can you imagine? Can I imagine what I could have done with my life if I hadn't been so worried about my pant size?
Hmm.
And so this is all about connecting with ourselves, increasing self esteem, and changing the way we relate to our bodies and food and what size pants we're wearing on one day, and getting really clear on creating freedom in our lives. And so January is going to be freedom from the scale. I'm going to have another month that's dedicated specifically to body image and looking at ways that people can create freedom for themselves, because putting down the booze is great. But I believe, just like you said, I'm either progressing or I'm regressing. And for me, it's not enough to say, oh, well, I didn't take a drink today. I want to say, well, yeah, I didn't take a drink today, but I also took myself to yoga and ate something that made me feel nourished and satisfied. And I didn't worry about what number was on the scale. In fact, I threw out my scale and I don't need to look at that number. I don't need to worry about it anymore.
Don't need to obsess on it. I love that. Well, listen, I could talk to you all day, but
Likewise.
tell us how people can get a hold of you if they're ready to start loving themselves a little more, maybe work on some of the issues after sobriety. What's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Visit the website. It's myinternalweather.com, www.myinternalweather.com. And there's a contact link on there. And my email address, if you want to get in touch directly, not through the website, is Lily, Lily, one L in the middle, at myinternalweather.com.
Awesome. Well, Lily, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate all the resources that you have shared and all your insights and perspective. And I look forward to talking with you in the future. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Arlena, so much.